You are not struggling with procrastination because you are lazy. You are losing a silent spiritual battle because every single time you break a promise to yourself, you actively drain your own soul's power. You think discipline is just about waking up early and working hard, but deep psychology reveals it is actually a hidden spiritual law that alters how reality responds to your presence. Because at its core, discipline is the ability to govern yourself consciously instead of being ruled entirely by impulse. And that changes everything for you. Your body changes, your mind changes, your future changes, your identity changes, because human beings are creatures of repetition. Whatever consistently controls your behavior eventually shapes your life. Impulses shape lives, habits shape lives, attention shapes lives. So the real question becomes, who is governing your existence? Your highest consciousness or your temporary cravings? Because discipline is never punishment, it is self-leadership. And in a world designed to constantly distract, stimulate, tempt, overwhelm, and fragment people psychologically, the ability to direct yourself intentionally has become sacred. Let me ask you this. What area of your life currently feels most controlled by impulse instead of intentionality? Think about that. Human beings naturally seek comfort. That is biological. The nervous system prefers familiarity, ease, predictability, immediate gratification, and there is nothing inherently wrong with comfort. But growth often requires temporary discomfort. Learning requires discomfort. Healing requires discomfort. Transformation requires discomfort. Mastery requires discomfort, which means this: the life a person consciously desires and the life their impulses naturally gravitate toward are often not the same life. That tension exists inside almost every human being. The desire for expansion versus the desire for immediate relief. And discipline is the bridge between vision and behavior. Without discipline, most dreams remain emotional fantasies, because desire alone does not transform lives consistently. Repeated action does. People think discipline only changes outcomes, but discipline changes identity first. Every time a person keeps a promise to themselves, their self-trust deepens slightly, and self-trust is foundational psychologically. Because many people secretly do not trust themselves at all. They say they will begin tomorrow, then abandon themselves tomorrow. Promise themselves change, then retreat into old patterns again. So over time, that weakens internal integrity. So people just go around not having trust in themselves, but disciplined action rebuilds internal alignments gradually. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you begin seeing yourself differently. You begin to think, I am someone who follows through. I can trust myself. I can depend on myself. I can fall back on myself. And that identity shift is powerful, because eventually discipline stops feeling like force, like punishment, like a to-do list, and starts feeling like self-respect. One of the deepest misunderstandings about discipline is thinking it is cold, mechanical, rigid, motionless. But true discipline is often devotion, carefully crafted devotion. Devotion to your future, your craft, your healing, your purpose, your body, your peace, your growth. It's sacred what you do, when you devote yourself. A disciplined person is repeatedly saying, "This matters enough for me to continue even when motivation disappears." And that is spiritual. It is sacred, because spirituality is not only about belief. Spirituality is also about alignment, about repeatedly choosing what nourishes your highest self instead of constantly surrendering to what weakens you temporarily. And in modern life, that requires enormous awareness. The modern world profits from distraction. I know you know this. This is important to understand psychologically. Modern systems constantly compete for human attention. Social media, advertising, entertainment, algorithms, instant gratification, including this video. The average nervous system is overstimulated constantly, and overstimulation weakens intentionality. Because when attention becomes fragmented, focus becomes difficult, stillness becomes difficult, discipline becomes difficult. This is why disciplined people often appear different energetically. You would expect otherwise. You would expect them to be more tired, more drained, but instead they are more energized, more attentive, more focused, more alert. Their attention is more directed, their energy is less scattered, and directed energy creates momentum. This is why discipline feels hard initially. The brain prioritizes efficiency. Habits automate behavior, which means old patterns become neurologically familiar pathways. So when a person begins changing behavior intentionally, the brain initially always resists. Not because transformation is impossible, but because the nervous system prefers predictability. This is why early discipline feels uncomfortable. Waking up earlier, exercising consistently, studying regularly, regulating emotions, reducing distractions at first. The old self protests very loudly, but repetition gradually rewires behavior, and eventually, what once felt difficult becomes your identity. One of the highest forms of discipline is emotional discipline, not suppression, regulation. The ability to feel emotion without becoming completely ruled by it. Because too many human beings live reactively, reacting impulsively, speaking impulsively, consuming impulsively, quitting impulsively. It's almost like they have no mind of their own anymore. Everything they do is a response. And impulsive living often creates unstable lives. Discipline introduces intentional pause, the pause between emotion and action. That pause changes destinies because wisdom often lives inside restraints. Discipline creates freedom. People often imagine discipline as restrictive, but ironically, discipline creates freedom. Financial discipline creates options. Health discipline creates vitality. Mental discipline creates peace. Creative discipline creates mastery. Undisciplined living often feels free initially, but eventually creates consequences. Chaos, instability, regret, dependency, and most of all, lack of self-trust. Whereas disciplined living may feel uncomfortable temporarily, but creates long-term expansion, always. And that is one of life's deepest paradoxes. Short-term discomfort often creates long-term freedom, and short-term indulgence often creates long-term limitation. There is a spiritual power of keeping your word. There is something spiritually transformative about a person who trusts their own word. When you say, "I will do this," and then do it consistently. When you say, "I will do this," and then do it consistently. That is godlike behavior. It changes your relationship with yourself. You stop seeing yourself as fragmented. You become internally integrated. And internal integrity creates psychological power, because now your mind understands, when I decide something consciously, I move accordingly. That alignment builds confidence naturally, not performative confidence, earned, quiet confidence, self-trust. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation fluctuates naturally. Human emotion changes constantly. Some days you feel inspired, other days you feel tired, discouraged, distracted, doubtful. If action depends entirely on emotion, consistency collapses eventually. Discipline allows action to continue even when emotion fluctuates. It's not perfect, but it's consistent enough to create momentum, and momentum changes identity. The people who master themselves are powerful people. The most powerful people are not always the loudest people. They are often the most internally governed people. The people who can focus intentionally, delay gratification, regulate emotion, continue through discomfort, protect their energy, direct their attention consciously, because self-mastery compounds. Tiny, disciplined actions, tiny, repeatedly kept promises, repeated over years, reshapes entire lives. Bodies transform, careers transform, minds transform, relationships transform, and eventually, people begin living lives that once seemed impossible to them, not through magic, not through manifestation, but through sustained alignment. Discipline is how you love yourself. Discipline is also how you love your future self. Every disciplined action says, I care about the person I am becoming. Studying says that. Resting properly says that. Saving money says that. Exercising says that. Protecting your mind says that. Discipline is delayed self-respect. It is choosing actions today that your future self will benefit from tomorrow. And while that may sound simple, many people spend years sacrificing their future for immediate emotional comfort. Discipline interrupts that cycle. It says, my temporary feelings will not completely govern my destiny. That is spiritual, sacred maturity. So no, discipline is not merely productivity culture. It's not aesthetics. It's not punishment. It's not robotic perfection. At its deepest level, discipline is conscious self-governance, the ability to direct your life intentionally instead of living entirely at the mercy of impulse, distraction, and temporary emotion, the ability to be God over your life. And in a world constantly trying to fracture human attention, that ability has become sacred. Because discipline shapes identity, it shapes nervous systems, choices, destinies. It teaches a person, I can trust myself, I can continue, I can build, I can become, I can fall back on myself. And perhaps that is why discipline feels spiritual, because every time a human being consciously chooses alignment over impulse, they reclaim a little more authorship over their existence intentionally. And intentional living is one of the rarest things in the modern world. Intentional living is not what social media says it is. Intentional living is the art of discipline. I'd like you to answer these questions carefully in the comments. Number 1, what promise to yourself have you repeatedly abandoned? Number 2, What habit would change your life most dramatically if you practiced it consistently for 1 year? Number 3, what would your future self thank you for if you started today? It's been my pleasure as always to sit with you. This has been the Human Mirror. Look closely, you are never invisible. I'll see you in the next reflection.